Okay, so we're in session 12 of this, so creating charts in Microsoft Excel. There's lots of examples of charts and editing them, adding labels and things and formatting them, and then we're going to talk about pivot tables at the end. It's worth noting that we're covering Excel because it's good for small data analysis and quick, easy results, and because so many people use it in organizations, it's a great skill to have. For more complex things, we're going to be actually programming later on in the bootcamp and using free available tools and things like Python, getting you started with some programming to do some really powerful things quite quickly and easily that Excel can't do. Although if you know Excel inside out, you can do an awful lot inside Excel. So the people who determine your pensions, for instance, and my pension, are called actuaries. You may have heard the term. People, they tend to joke that if you think accountancy is boring, actuaries are boring to accountants. So it gives a scale of they're just constantly working through numbers and predictions and models and things. But actuarial sciences relies heavily on Microsoft Excel. That's the whole peoples in their companies are just constantly doing data analysis and doing prediction about what the value of a pension will be, how long some people are going to live, whether someone's going to redeem that pension, how much it's going to cost the company. Now, when we jump on to doing things like programming with Python, then I'm going to teach you, and Steve's going to work with you on some more complex and sort of interactive and higher quality visualizations, actually. I might just throw this up just to show you as a starter point. So we'll do some interactive things with something called Plotly that you can program in, but in essence, it's an incredible quick, easy Python programming visualization tool where you've got interactive visuals of what's going on, and you can dig straight into those in a way that you just can't in Microsoft Excel, for instance. It does need a bit of programming, but the thought and the design that's gone into those in terms of the choice of color and of sizing of the points and the displays make it look really beautiful, visually appealing, and make you get much more information out of that. So Excel is fine. If you've got the data in Excel, you need a quick chart or something. But if you need something that looks visually like top drawer, we'll teach you how to use Plotly later on. Okay, so we're mostly going to be working with the recommended charts and the charting sections here for this session. All the files are already up on the Teams site, so you can just go to the relevant folder there. Now, it may seem slightly patronizing, but I'll just go back to basics here and define it also. A chart is just a graphical representation of numeric data in a worksheet. Now, we can pick apart bits of this and be really pedantic and say, well, is it just numeric data? You can display non-numeric data, or what we call categorical data, so data that just falls into different categories and things, but we tend to represent it numerically with whole numbers or with numbers and decimals or fractions and things. So when you want to create a chart or change an existing chart, you can choose from 17 different chart types with numerous subtypes and combo charts in Excel. There are new types of charts that have been introduced in Excel 2016, and I don't think it's going to be too long before we're getting a new version of Excel revamped as well. But there you've got tree map, sunburst, histograms, box and whisker, waterfall, and funnel. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about what each of these charts do, but the best way to understand them is just to get some data and do some of these exercises that we're doing. And when it says create a pie chart of this, don't just create a pie chart, create a box and whisker plot as well, or a funnel graph, or a sunburst chart as well. Now, at its base level, and what you're probably going to end up spending most of your time working with, will be column bars. So column charts, which are useful for comparing values across categories for a time period, or line graphs, and these are used for showing trends in data at equal intervals. So you've got the time axis on the bottom, and then the points will be in different positions based upon where they fit in that line. Third type is generally a pie chart. Pie charts are often overused in presentations, actually, though, and I've got a bit of an issue with pie charts because it's very easy to tell a simple story with a pie chart, but actually if you've got some complex data or something that needs more explanation and understanding, a pie chart's really hard to do that with, given that you just have one large segment and a few smaller segments. Comparatively, it's really hard to look at smaller segments and compare their size, whereas with a bar chart or a column chart, it's much easier to see the subtle differences between them. A donut chart is very similar to a pie chart, but is spread out slightly more, and it visually is easier to understand. Then you've got the bar chart listed here and the area chart. So this is useful for emphasizing magnitude of change over time, relationships as part of a whole here. Then we've got scatter charts. Excel's scatter chart function, it plots scatters fine if you know what you're doing. If you just get some data, highlight the data, and then say, make me a scatter chart, chances are it'll do it wrong because it understands the data wrong. Okay, we'll show an example of this later on. Then you've got bubble charts, which are good for comparing three sets of values. Then there's stocks, surface charts, for instance, a radar chart. So if you've got multiple different variables for each subject, these are standardized to the same scale. Okay. I've got an example of a radar chart I'll bring up later on, I think, and some column charts from a project I was recently working on with an organization. And then we've got a combo chart too. So this is where you've got two or more chart types, such as line and columns, depicted in a single graphic. Now, before you think about what type of chart you're going to show, you need to understand the data and the audience. And again, we'll talk about this from a data visualization point of view later on in the boot camp. But just at the first instance, from an Excel point of view, you have to have your data formatted properly and ready to insert. You have to think if you've got it in the right scales and the right visual presentation of that. For instance, if you're trying to show currency information, do you want it listed in pence or in pounds and pence? If it's time, Excel's naturally not going to understand the numbers 1 to 60, 1 to 60, 1 to 60. It's not going to understand that 2.01 comes after 2.0, comes after 1.59. So you have to make sure that your data is formatted properly going into this. So there are two approaches to identifying the data for your chart. If you lay it out properly, your worksheet, then you can select one or more ranges over time. The second way is to identify the chart type and then choose the data. So I'm going to show the slides for this bit, and then for the other activities, I'll pause, let you go away and do those with the sheet that it asks you, and then we'll come back together and move on to the next section. Okay, just a bit more interactive. So if you wanted to do the activity for this, then you'd open the fourth Coffee financial history file for the lesson. Go to cells B2 to B8 and insert a tab there. In the insert tab, you're going to go to the charts group and click a pie button and create a 2D pie chart. I'm going to be looking with series 1 being the value for 2014. So just to show what that looks like here, but unfortunately not a high quality print screen here, but series 1 point is taken from 2014. And we can see comparatively how that compares to all of the others. So coffee and espresso is this light blue section, and we've got bakery as the next section. We've got coffee, packaged coffee, and deli. Okay, and then the total all listed together, obviously. So we've got all sorts of information that's being put into this pie chart, but it's not properly formatted. We have a title that's just listed as chart title. It says series 1.1, but doesn't have the name of that series. When you hover over it or look at it, it should tell you what it is, and the legend should be appropriately labeled. That's not to mention the problem that we've got with colors as well. I mean, would anyone say that this is a good choice of colors to show comparison?
No.
Yeah, So there's a couple of different ways you can think about colors for comparison. If you're trying to show a gradual change between things or a similarity as you move from one end to the other, then you may start blue down here, dark blue, and then wind your way up through purple and maybe to green at the top, or red if you want to show real contrast at the ends, but a similarity between them. Or if you want to show just definite difference, then you go for blues, reds, greens, pinks, yellows. So a range of strong different colors, but blue next to orange is quite a jarring transition there, especially when that's next to grey, which isn't too dissimilar from the blue next to it. So what you're being asked to do then is to go to the second largest slice and you see that it's including the total, which it shouldn't be. So we need to make sure that's deleted from there, and then that it's focusing on the right elements. Beyond this, this then sets the title properly. It sets the labels properly when you select the right data, and it doesn't include the total, which makes this all look better. So you can see far easier what's going on. Coffee accessories is such a thin slither compared to the others. Now you could choose a chart type that will make the chart big enough to show that difference, or you can look at your data and go, if coffee accessories is such a small amount, do we really need to have that as a separate group? Or could we just merge it so it's coffee accessories and packaged coffee and tea? Okay, so you can then click outside the chart, hit File, and then Print. And you can see the setup that is given there, and then save this as the chart solution. If you want to just print the chart from a workbook rather than the whole workbook with the charts, then just select the chart and then hit File and Print, and you'll just get the chart out. So this little exercise illustrated that the chart's data selection must contain sufficient information to interpret the data at a glance, and it didn't distinguish between the column B information and the data that you were looking at and actually wanted in column B. It included the total, it didn't get the labels right, it didn't get the title right. So the automatic selection thing isn't overly reliable, but it's a good starting point. It creates the chart for you to then correct it. It's a bit like it's easier to start with a really badly written essay and then modify it a little bit to make it better than start trying to write just an excellent essay to start with. Okay, now you have the alternative option to what we've done here, where we created a chart and embedded that chart inside the worksheet. Now you can just take that chart and create it into a new sheet as just the chart itself. And that's something we'll come to slightly later on. So if you want to move a chart, if you've inserted it, it'll be embedded. We want to move it to either another worksheet or to its own individual sheet. Then we have to do is click a corner of the chart and using the sizing handles, so the way that you can reshape it bigger and smaller, you can use that to change the size of it, then move it by clicking in the white space of the chart and drag it using the four-headed black mouse pointer. So you can move it up, down, left, right within the workbook. Okay, I don't think people need to move a chart, but if you want to do this exercise, just let me know in the chat or unmute yourselves now, but I think you're all more than capable of, one, having created a chart, moving it around.
Yep.
Okay. So, choosing the right chart for you. You can create most charts from the data that you've arranged in rows or columns in a worksheet. It's just that some of them won't show any useful information, or you won't get any knowledge out of them. A single pie chart can't be used for comparisons across periods of time or for analysing trends. Now, a column chart works well for comparisons. In a 2D or 3D column chart, each data marker is represented by a column. They distinguish between a column chart and a bar chart. I call them both bar charts generally, and people in industry do as well. But Excel likes to call them columns to separate them out and make it clear which is which. Now you can have just a standard column where you've got one piece of data being shown, so a single number, or you can have a stacked one where it's a category and then a different category stacked on top, and a different one stacked on top, and a different one stacked on top. And that lets you show the difference over time. And you can sort of see where this is going, hopefully based on that past file that we were working with, the data file. And a line chart shows points connected by a line for each value. So what we're going to do, I'm going to pause here for a second, and we're going to take time for you each to work through this little exercise. So using the workbook from the previous exercise, which was called the fourth coffee financial history in the team site. So if you get that file up, the fourth coffee financial history file, and then follow the steps that are listed here and in the slides that are in the team site as well. And then if you can just let me know when you've done that. So we'll give it 5 minutes for people to just work through that, setting up that column chart.
Sorry, Ian. So we are drawing the pie chart or what, or column chart?
Yeah, the column chart.
Okay, thank you.
So it's the column chart for this fourth coffee financial history file.
Thank you.
So once you've created the column chart, it asks you to then go on and to create a line with markers chart as well. So that'll look like this. So you've got the comparison both with the bars and over time with the individual trends being joined up. Again, it's a visual analytics thing, but our brains are the most powerful pattern processing devices in the world. So often we need to just let them rip on the data, and getting as many different visualizations as possible can help our brains to understand more what's going on and spot the trends, the patterns, the things that are going on there. Okay, we'll give it 1 more minute just in case anyone hits anything that doesn't work, but otherwise we'll assume that everyone's okay with the column and the line charts there. Okay, is everyone all right with that? The column chart, the line chart? Happy for me to move on?
Yep.
Okay. If you get stuck, don't worry. We can always come back to it later, or if you just email me and let me know, I can make time for that. So the column and line charts provide two views of the same data, and they illustrate that the chart type you choose depends on the analysis you want to portray. So the pie chart, which shows values as part of a whole year, displays the distribution of sales just for 1 year. Our line chart strength is about showing trends over time. The line chart you created in the previous exercise includes data markers to indicate each year's sales. So a data marker is a bar, area, dot, slice, or other symbol in a chart that represents a single data point or value that originates from a worksheet call and so. So related data markers in a chart constitute a data series. So we've got lots of different markers over time or over, different variables or things as they change, then that's a data series. Now, if you're new to charting, then the number of charts to choose can be overwhelming. So the recommended charts button in the Insert tab helps narrow the choices depending on the data that you select. So it looks at the data and tries to be a bit clever. Sometimes it's all right, sometimes it's not, but it's a good starting point at least. So using that workbook, select the year labels and coffee and espresso cells from A2 to F3. Then in the Insert tab, use a recommended chart. So it recommends 5 chart types and explains when you should use each of the charts underneath its example. So click the other 4 chart types and read the description. Once you've done that, do a line chart in the recommended way and move it to a new sheet. Okay, so I'll just give you 2 minutes to just work through that. So you should notice that the funnel chart selection is just an entirely useless graph there. So ignore that one, obviously. Some of the others, the pie chart doesn't really help us because that's a comparative, like more of a proportion breakdown of all sales, but it's over time, so that doesn't really mean anything to us. Maybe the area chart is useful, the stacked area. So if you've not come across that before, that looks like this, where it's like a line chart, but it fills in the area underneath. So it's more visually stark when there's a big increase. Okay, so creating a bar chart next. So bar charts are similar to column charts, can be used to illustrate comparisons among individual items as far as Excel is concerned. Data that's arranged in columns or rows on a worksheet can be plotted in a bar chart. Now, clustered bar charts compare values across categories, and stacked bar charts show the relationship of individual items to the whole of that item. And then you've got the side-by-side bar chart you create in this exercise will illustrate 2 views of the same data. So what I'd like you to do is select cells A2 to F7 again, and go to the Insert and insert a bar chart. You want to do a 3D clustered bar subtype, and the data is displayed in a clustered bar chart, and the Design tab is active there. So if we do that first, And then once you've got a clustered bar, if you create a stacked bar, then it should look like this. If I get it up, it should look like this. So this is just again, highlighting A2 to F7 and then creating a stacked bar chart. And we get an idea for the individual contribution that each of these different things makes to the whole chart, but also the comparative difference over years of what's going on. Once you've done that, move that to a new sheet and call it a stacked bar. Is everyone okay so far?
Yes.
Yeah.
Am I going too slow? Is it all really straightforward, or is it okay pace?
Very straightforward.
Okay. So once you've got your chart created, then you might want to format it in a specific way. This is just done in the design tab. So if I just move this up, get your chart selected, you've got the formatting tab here and you've got the design tab here. So you can change the way that it's done quite easily with the different design styles and things. You want to choose something that's visually suited to what you're trying to do. And then in terms of the format, there's a whole host of different ways that you can format it with different shape, colors, styles, and sizes and things as well. So if you go to the chart design section, then we've got a quick style option. So if you wanted to format that pie chart that you created initially with quick style, select it and then look at the different options that are there available to you in the quick layout and then see which one suits what you're trying to give. Now if I just were to select this column chart for instance and then do chart design and look at quick layout, we've got all sorts of different styles that are available, dark background with almost like neon or fluorescence going on in there, or a light double-lined curves in there. And then with the quick layout, got all sorts of different layout options and things that are available to us based on that. You can even get the data showing in the chart for you if you want it shown in that way, or with the actual values hovering over the points. Okay, so there's a huge amount of flexibility and it's all just down to you playing with it to make sure you're comfortable with the way that it's being represented. So the chart colors are determined by the theme of the worksheet. If you want to change the colors, it's best to just change the whole theme and then it will constantly use the colors for that theme for you. So I think I'm just going to move on beyond that because it's quite quick and easy for you to choose a different thing with the quick layout and to set that up. If you want to add text onto your chart, generally it'll auto create chart titles, so you can add those on. But in terms of axis labels and things, if you need to add those, and in general a good chart always is properly labeled, then you can add a chart element. So add axis labels for the horizontal or the X and vertical for the Y. Okay, and all sorts of different data labels and things that you can turn on and off. Generally, I think it's better to have them off, but it might be that there's a situation where you need to display them. Okay. So beyond the text, you might need to format a particular data series. So you can go on the Format tab and you can change fill colors or patterns that are applied to chart elements from that. There's also easy ways to change the chart's borderline, for instance, as well. Again, we're just back in the formatting of the chart, and you can change the borderline and all the things that are going on there, for instance. So that's now changed to a dark blue around the edge. Okay. Now you can modify a chart by adding or deleting individual elements or by moving or resizing that chart. You change the chart type without having to delete the existing chart and create a new one. So you don't have to modify it. You can just go to an existing chart that's already linked to a certain data, and then you can change the chart type. Now, the easiest way to do that is to select it, go to chart design and change chart type. And maybe you choose a different type, so an XY scatter, for instance, where it's just representing the points rather than the lines that join them up. Or even just a different type of line chart. More than anything, it's about understanding the audience, what your presentation or what your chart's supposed to be displaying, and then trying out different things to see how they work. Now, adding elements to a chart's really easy. All you have to do is just double click on them, select the data, and then change what data is being shown or add additional elements to that. So it's all done through the visual interface. And now there's an activity here to do that, but I think I'll leave that up to you for your own time to go through that based on how simple it is. And likewise for deleting elements from a chart. Now, the quick analysis tools in Excel and the features there allow you to analyze it with just a couple of clicks of the mouse, so it's nice and easy to get started with. Although, as we've seen, it's not generally perfect, but it's a good start. So selecting a data range and the quick analysis button appears, allowing you to quickly create charts, add tiny miniature graphs called spark lines, we'll come to them in a minute, work with totals, format data with conditional formatting, and to create pivot tables. So we're going to go to the 12 chart solution file. So I'm just going to try and get that one up. Oh no, sorry, that's from the previous exercise. So it's the same workbook that we've been working with so far with the same data. So all you do is select the data. I'll just do that here. Select the data, and then in the bottom right we should get the quick analysis pop-up showing up here when that's being created. But that's if the data is properly formatted. Now, when you click that, it gives you options of different charts and things to show, but in general, you'll know the types of charts and things that you want, so you can do that easier through the Insert Chart menu. You can add a chart, or you can add what's called a spark line. I'll come to that in a moment. And then all you do is just click to add. Now, with the quick analysis and with lots of the chart tools, there's the option to work with the proper numbers or percentages of a whole. And easily we could see just from a column bar chart, if we take this bar chart, for instance, and change that type, then if we were to change it to a column or bar, you can do that as a 3D bar out of a 100% stacked bar rather than just a 3D stacked bar. And when it's listed like that, it's all scales everything to be out of 100%, but shows you what the individual proportions of those are and how they change over time. That's something you want to do if sales don't change much over time. Or if you need to see what proportion of your sales are made in certain categories and how that changes over time without the absolute values needing to be involved. Okay, so next we're going to be talking about pivot tables. Now, pivot table report and pivot charts are collaborative ways to quickly condense and rearrange large amounts of data. So they do some of the native things in Excel that we've been doing sort of in the summaries the last couple of days. So you can use a pivot table report to analyze and display the numerical data in detail and answer unforeseen questions about it. So pivot table report and pivot charts are especially designed for analyzing large amounts of data, subtotaling and gathering numeric data, expanding and collapsing levels of data to filter your results for you, and moving rows to columns or columns to rows to examine different summaries of the data. So we're going to be working with the school test data example here. And what I think we'll do is I'll pause, get you all to work through this step by step, because pivot tables can be daunting if you're not familiar with them. So this is good for you to get hands-on experience rather than just me leading from the front here. So I'll pause it for, give it 3 minutes for you to work through the next few slides as steps. So if you open the school test data file and then start to work through this to do the pivot table, and then to see how that works and play about with that. Okay.
Hi, Ian. I have a question.
Sure.
It says return to the count sheet and drag the grade field into the pivot table field. I don't know how to do that. I don't get that part.
So let's just go. So on the count sheet and drag the grade field. So okay, let me just go through this step by step, get mine to that point as well. So if I do that up here, just step by step so that you can see. So insert and recommended pivot chart.
It's the second one.
Of course, thanks. Pivot table, yeah. Get them all in there. I think my pivot table is looking slightly different to everyone else's. So the next thing it's asking you to do is to return to the count sheet and drag the grade field enable to the values section. Oh yeah, so you got the values down here, that's why. So if you've got grade, just drag it to there. So you'll get the information values.
Yeah. Okay, I see that. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Sorry, I was a bit slow there.
It's fine.
we okay with the pivot table? Or still working through that example?
I'm okay with it.
Okay, thanks, Ed. Okay, so the last thing to talk about then, unless anyone needs more time, the last thing that I was going to go through is pivot charts. So a pivot chart is an essential tool to help organize and arrange large amounts of data from different worksheets or from a large worksheet in and of itself. So in addition to summarizing a huge amount of data, you can visualize the information with simple charts. So there's another exercise here, just working through the same spreadsheet that you've just been building on to then add a pivot chart to that. And when you add the pivot chart, it gives you this flexibility to see what's going on based upon the data that's being pulled in there. So it auto updates in essence based upon all the information and some of the selectors that you have. Okay, so do you want to just, after you've done that pivot table, work through this pivot chart exercise, and we'll give a couple of minutes for this.
I don't have a pivot chart button. It's a combined button, and it's made chart very different. It looks like hierarchy of things rather than table like you have. So you know, when you created, would you be able to please give the demo again, the pivot chart table? So for me, it showed blank like yours, and then you selected on the top section all the fields, and then it came in like a table. But for me, it's just nothing is there. Shall I quickly share my screen? Okay, thank you. I think you are on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, if you could share your screen, thanks. I'll stop sharing mine. You can share yours.
Can you see the spreadsheet?
Yeah. Oh, wow, that's weird.
Yeah. So I clicked all that, and it's like that. Should I try again? Maybe I did some step wrong.
If you go back to the test data, have you got all the data highlighted? Yeah, okay. And then do insert on the insert tab. And then do recommended pivot tables.
Oh, okay. This one, okay.
Yeah.
So I think I selected something pivot chart.
Yeah, I did as well, but I've just redone it just to check what was going on. So if you do recommended pivot tables.
Yeah. Oh, okay. And then select anything of that.
And then go for the first one, which is absolutely fine. But then you see you've got on the right, you've got the selectors to add in more information, so you can select grade and you've got the groupings in there. But you can take some of them out if you don't want to break it down by school, for instance, or school type description.
What should I select?
So for the previous example, it was based on the grade information. So after you've done that and got a pivot table started looking up, then the recommended one, sorry, I told you to do the first one. It's in the recommended one to do would be a count of scale score by proficiency level.
I'll delete these. This is insert pivot table, recommended pivot table. Which one?
Pivot table, yeah.
Pivot table.
Oh, no, the recommended one.
Sorry.
Sorry.
And then first one.
Then the count of
this one
scale by that one by the next one, I think it is. So you count of color scale by proficiency level is the recommendation. So if you scroll down, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That one. Yep, the fourth one, and hit OK. Then it's got some of the information in, and then now you've got this is because it's got some of the information shown, but not much. Then if you go to the count sheet and then take the grade and drag grade, the name grade, down to the values section.
Do I need to take it first? No.
I don't believe so. No, I think if you can just drag it, it will just automatically tick it in essence.
Okay.
And then you drag the scale score so you can work through the rest of the steps.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So by the time you worked through the pivot table of pivot charts setup, it should be looking like this as far as the student science test scores goes. So you'll see that based on that sales data that we've been working on, a pivot table and pivot chart could have showed some of that information quite efficiently and quickly, and we've done more of the hand cranking to get custom things like the sum ifs and the conditional formulae out. But it's easier to do some of that filtering outside of a pivot table to then get custom things rather than just a generic snapshot of what's going on. So when I was asking you to do things like modify it to make sure that we don't include returned items, for instance, when we're calculating the value or adding that up, that's harder to do in a pivot table. It's possible, but it's just more work. So sometimes it's nice and quick and easy to do a pivot table and pivot chart, and other times if you've got manipulation to do it yourself, is the take home from there. So just sort of to round off the presentation part of the session today, we've talked about building charts and choosing those, how to format it and modify a chart and move it to a new sheet and to resize if you need to. And then in terms of quick analysis tools, we talked about pivot tables and pivot charts. So that's all of the slides that I had to work through for today, and tomorrow we'll be just rounding off the final parts, session 13. So I was going to dedicate the rest of the time if people had any questions or if you wanted to work through more the activities from this session, or more importantly the sort of case study sales data that I've provided you with to work through. So now that we've talked about charts and pivot tables and things, you can use some of these charts and to represent visually some of the information that you generate from that big data set. So I'll allow the time for just carrying on with all of that. If you've got any questions, I'll be here to answer those. But otherwise, I think we've come to the end of the part today. So is everyone okay with everything we've talked about?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, I'll hang around and then keep an eye on the chat. So feel free to drop off the call if you want to, or if you want to just stay on just to finish working through these, and that's absolutely fine. Otherwise, I'll see you all tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks all.
Bye.
Bye.